Welcome to Web Development Lesson 1.6. In this lesson, we're going to take what we learned in 1.5 about using containers to organize our web pages and focus on how to lay out the entire page. We'll discuss about some common sections on web pages and also an alternative to using divs to lay out a web page, which are HTML semantic elements. So let's get to it. So what are some common sections on a web page? Most web pages will have some kind of a banner, title, heading up top to kind of bring light that, hey, you're on my website. Usually what follows is a nav bar, menu, a bunch of links on how to navigate your website. Now, this could exist underneath the heading. This could exist on top of the heading. We've seen links where they're on the side, either side. But at some point, you have a nav bar section, a menu section, the links to navigate a website. From there, now you have all kinds of things. But in general, it's your main content area. Now, within your main content area, you can have other areas, other divs to segment the content. Now, what's not being shown on this particular wireframe is the fact that many websites also have a footer. So what happens when a web developer gets this kind of wireframe diagram? Well, eventually what happens is that they code it and it somehow transforms into an actual web page. Again, this is the same thing that happens in comic books, magazine editors, movies even. Things get sketched out before any real work is done. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to try to take our sketch now and actually implement that web page layout. So I'm going to try to do a little split screen here where this is a picture of the web page we're trying to replicate. Here's our replit. And hopefully I can manage my little screen size here where you can kind of see everything. All right, so one of the things I want you to take away from this lesson is that web pages are typically, just filled with divs, because divs are how you can, create different sections on a web page. So anytime you see a box of some type and it looks like it's containing things, that's a div. So let's write div here. Let's close the div. Again, you're going to have so many divs. You're going to want to be neat about how you open and close your tags, as well as your indentation. So what do we have here? So let's do looks like an image, source, and I'll just put face.png. Again, when you do a wireframe, there's no need to actually, put the actual pictures. That can come later. So we'll say heading 1, just for the sake of having something on there. And let's do heading 3 with a heading 3. Okay, so we have effectively laid out this top part. So now that we're ready to create our next section, guess what? That is another div. So again, you're going to see your web page is just going to be filled with divs because every div identifies a section. And what's this section? It's a bunch of links. So let's do some sample links here. href. Don't have to actually link it to anything. We'll do link 1. Let's close the link. And I don't know if I'm actually going to do the 9 links that are there. Maybe we'll just do 3, just to be representative of the fact that there's a couple of links here. Now in this case, when I opened up my div, I didn't close it immediately. But notice how my indentation kind of gave me the hint, oh, wait a minute, I haven't closed it yet. Again, however you decide to do it, you're going to want to start picking up this practice of, opening and closing your divs. So I'm actually going to try that on this one. So let's say div, and I'm going to close it immediately. And notice what I do. I kind of do a couple of enters, skip a couple lines, and I go back up and let me start filling it in. Now for this one, I'm going to focus on just on this container because I don't want to get into the example of having a container within a container. That will be for a future lesson. So let's do our heading 3. Oops, heading 3. Heading 3. Oops. Page 3. And let's do a paragraph. And recall, I mean, for a paragraph, you don't have to get fancy with it. You know, just put a couple of words down, maybe a break, and then repeat it, just to kind of get the sense of. And you know, I'm going to do this for this one. Now, the reason I changed my thought in terms of where I wanted to write the paragraph was to kind of show you the fact that once you start creating web pages, your indentation is going to increase a lot. And that's a good thing. Don't be lazy. Indentation will help you spot when things line up. So I can see that this entire part is our paragraph. The heading's right here. And this entire part is a div. So notice how things line up. And even to the point that Replit gives you a little line, a ruler that you can measure up to see if things have lined up. Have you closed out the proper elements? Okay, so let's kind of review a little bit here, and let's give it a try. So I'm going to open this back up, and let's run it. And I think I kind of lost some of my windows here, so I'm going to just hit refresh. Okay, there we go. All right, so here's our layout. It's not very fancy, but it does identify all the sections. What's kind of missing from here is the CSS. CSS is what's going to help us to lay things out. So let me see what we have in CSS. We have nothing. So let's write a little bit of CSS just to kind of give you the sense of, you know, here are the boxes. So in CSS, I'm going to style all my divs, all my containers. I'm going to give them a border of 1, a solid color, and let's do it gray. Let's see how that works out. Okay, so hopefully now, and I'm going to open this up in a separate window, and then maybe zoom in a little bit. You start to get the sense of, yeah, you know, it kind of looks like the layout. Again, later on, you'll actually start to fill things in with actual information, style them, add pictures, and then your website starts to gain life. But none of that can happen. The CSS cannot happen. The magic of making it beautiful can't happen unless you actually write the HTML first. So I want to conclude this video with a more modern way of doing this. The idea of divs, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's antiquated. It's still used a lot. I still use it, but they've since brought in some other elements called semantic elements. So there's actually an element called a header to put stuff like your banners, your logos, pictures. There is a element now called the nav. You know, there's elements called a side, footer, article, section. Now these are called semantic because it gives meaning to the container. When you look at your code like this, all you see is div. It really doesn't tell you what the div is about. Whereas if this was called a header, then you would say, okay, that's part of the top part of the page. It's the header. Or even better yet, the one that I actually do use is the nav. So instead of creating a div and then put a bunch of links in it, I'll actually use the semantic element called nav. Throughout this course, though, we're going to stick with the divs because that's like ground zero. If you have some older websites that don't use the semantic elements, I still want you to be able to understand that divs are the containers that we can use to create layouts. So let's go back to our main page and let's review what we've done in this video. So we've talked about some common sections that are on a web page, such as a header, nav bar, main content, a footer section. We saw how we can use divs to create that layout on the web page, to include the fact that you might have elements in there that will force you to create other divs. And then finally, instead of using divs, which have no meaning, provide no meaning to the section, there are HTML semantic elements that can replace a div and act the same way. So hopefully you're excited about what's coming up next, which is to actually work on the appearance of a web page. Enjoy.